It was all so sudden. Just this morning, Yin was thinking about her day. Couldn't get any more interesting with all the paperwork when all of a sudden she was called to the drawing room. The servant told her she had visitors. Immediately she rushed there only to find the drawing room in chaos, as it's filled with the sound of a baby crying, complemented by the laughter of 3 children and the worried cries of 2 adults. Despite all that, the sight of the visitors puts a bright smile on Yin's face. Sister! Her dear sister came to visit her and her husband with their children. We're going to say Sin. Sin turned to Yin. Her worried, sickened face was replaced by a grin as she handed her baby to her midwife and scampered over to Yin. Oh, dear sister, look at you, she said, her arms spread out open, and she scooped Yin with an embrace. When they pulled away from each other, her sister is still smiling, admiring her. Oh, where are my manners? Her sister simply offered a curtsy, which permitted Yin to giggle. Your Majesty. Don't do that. It is weird having you do that, Yin teased. Anyway, you suddenly came here, no letter of any sorts. I wasn't able to prepare. Oh, don't worry about that. We were on our way home from our trip, and we think that we should pay you a visit. Thank God I was able to convince that redhead to let us in. I told him I'm your sister. Sin blabbered. She suddenly dipped her head and smiled. And we heard King Todoroki is here. Yin laughed. Did you come here to visit me or King Todoroki? To see King Todoroki and visit you while I'm at it. Oh well, you missed him. He was here 5 days ago. Her sister's smile fell and she turned to her husband. See, I told you we should have been here 5 days ago. Her poor husband could only sigh as he tended to their children. Well, that can't be helped. I guess King Bakugou will do, Sin said. Yin raised a brow. My husband? You want to meet my husband? Yes. Are you sure? Why? Is there something wrong with it? Yin looks a bit of a bad idea. Her sister doesn't really leave a good impression on every stranger she's met. Everyone says she's too talkative for a lady, while Yin found that side of her sister to be quite entertaining. While Yin find that side of her sister... Oh, sorry, I read the same thing. Her mother and all the people around them think otherwise. She's just afraid that Bakugou will lose his patience when her sister decided to talk nonstop. Oh, dear sister, don't worry. I'll behave myself. And so with her sister's precedence, Yin was walking down the halls trying to find Bakugou. She found him in his study and immediately informed him of what's happening. You want me to meet your sister, her husband, and her kids? He asked. She nodded. Yes, but can you say no if you want? I'll tell her. Bakugou immediately dropped everything and walked to her. What the hell are you talking about? Let's go. Having no choice but to prepare for what she might endure later, with her older sister and her husband clashing together, Yin followed Bakugou down the hallway and she led him to the drawing room. They stopped by the door and she saw a few buttons off his shirt were open. What are you doing? He looked down as her fingers worked with his shirt. Their faces a mere inch away from each other. Can I ask you for a favor? My sister isn't exactly what you expect. She's quite something, she said. And, I think it would be best if you and I could behave like a married couple. We are a married couple. Well, yes, that's true. Yes, we are. She then fixed his collar of his shirt. Let's just be presentable and civil towards her and her family. And be patient while you're at it. I can be civil and I'll try to be patient, he said, turning to the door as soon as Yin finishing his shirt. Yin inhaled before breathing out and opened the door. From here on, she might have to be on her best footing of a good relationship between her and her husband and her sister. When the news of my little sister's betrothal reached me, I was afraid she would end up with a deformed inbreed, but I guess there's nothing to worry about. Yin cringed at her sister's words. The first words she decided to say as soon as all formalities were given, and they sat down for tea. Yin and Bakugou sat together on a sofa, while her sister and husband sat on another sofa across from them. She looked at Bakugou nervously. Her heart raced when she saw a small glint in his eyes forming. You think I'm going to be a deformed inbred? Oh no, Yin thought. But before she could alterate the atmosphere, her sister spoke again. I do not mean to offend you, Your Majesty. I was merely expressing my gladness that Yin ended up with a handsome man like you. Bakugou immediately retorted and nodded. That seems to boost his ego. Have you two thought of having children yet? You two would make fine children. Yin had to pat her husband's back as he nearly choked on his tea, while her sister smiled. We've been reminded of it many times. Great, she's one of them. Bakugou muttered under his breath. Yin had to squeeze his arm, reminding him to behave. Well, let me tell you, her sister continued. Don't have too many of them. While children are a blessing from God, too many of them is too much to handle. I speak from experience. If our children in this room isn't enough proof, Yin doesn't know what is. Children need a lot of tending to. Good thing I have my midwife here. Sin pointed to her midwife and the man beside her. And I brought our own physician with us everywhere we go because our children tend to get sick all the time. Sir Megan, I'm a very good physician. Perhaps we could recommend him to you as soon as our children is past the age of being vulnerable to diseases. Her sister's husband said. Sin immediately turned to him. Oh, darling, what are you even talking about? Surely they can afford a physician at their own. Sir Magnian will stay with us. Right? Right. Her husband couldn't even get an argument as Sin kept blabbering. And did you know? Sir Magnium was the one who recommended that we should travel to the sea for your nephew will feel better. And it worked. This is why I say Sir Magnian is one of the best. Look at them. Her sister gestured to her children. They're all enough to run around. These little demons. Sin's husband sighed. Don't call our children little demons. We baptize them for a reason. Yin's sister ignored her husband and turned back to the royal couple. I believe you are yet to meet my youngest. As soon as she said that, her sister was bringing her baby over to them. Yin was panicking when her sister placed the baby in her arms, but in the end, she managed to hold the tiny human safely in her arms, and her sister's help. Oh, look at her. Yin cooed as her sister sat down beside her, leaving the baby for her and Bakugou to stare and wonder. She's so tiny and fluffy. Isn't she? My healthiest baby, her sister said. The baby in her arms started to reach for her hair. She noticed Bakugou shifting a little bit closer to peer at the baby. Your mother is very loud, he muttered to the baby, and Yin gave him a disapproving look. What? It's true. She ignored him and focused on the baby, grumbling on her hands. And she has your eyes. Yin smiled to her sister. Yes, and I'm very proud of that. Her sister beamed. I am so proud she took most of the Lin side. The women in our family are always so fierce, and my baby will grow up to be one like one. Bakugou suddenly reached out for the baby. He let his fingers touch the baby's cheeks. His gesture was heartwarming, but then he was followed by his words. That's fucking true. Katsuki, don't curse in front of the baby. Yin scolded. It's not like she can understand it. Still, she can pick up on it. She looked to see that her sister wasn't bothered as well. How old is this? He asked. She's only 7 months old, Your Majesty. She will be... Her sister was cut off when her eldest child bumped into a furniture and started crying. Her only 2 children broke into fits of laughter as they watched their sibling cry. The baby in her arms started to shift uncomfortably. Sir Magnus, please. Sin panicked as she tended to her child. Oh, please, he'll be fine, her sister's husband said, slumping into his chair while rubbing his temples. You know how weak your son is. Yin, can we please ask for a room so Sir Magnus can tend to my child? Yin immediately stood up. Yes, there's a servant outside. She was cut off when the baby started to cry from the noise. Sin was immediately going back and forth between her youngest and eldest while her husband started to contemplate his life choices. It all started to die down when Sir Magnus led Yin's sister outside. Sin is still in a little panic with her baby now in her arms and her eldest following behind her. Her husband came to collect their other 2 children. "Good morning, Your Majesties." Good morning, Your Majesties, he said before they all left the drawing room. All that's left was inside the room is Bakugou and Yin, contemplating by silence until they looked at each other and Yin started to laugh. A chuckle left Bakugou's lips as his wife leaned her forehead on his shoulder. Her laughter never ceased as he shook his head and said, "And they expect us to have children?" Yin's laugh started to crease. "Oh, well, they are not that bad. We just don't have to be overbearing like my sister." That ended well. Not to my sister, and especially not to her husband. They chuckled at the thought of it again. Yin, still leaning on Bakugou, did not even realize their closeness, as all they did was laugh and the warmth of the moment. Only then did she realize her words and reminded that she cannot get pregnant, especially right now. Not until she succeeds the throne for herself. Having her sister at the palace is a blessing for Yin. She is no longer have to content dreariness from having only to work with the papers all day, and her day hasn't been so restrained like before. She was caught up with the company of her sister and her children that she almost completely forgot about the issue with Glacia. That is until she heard from Uraraka that a letter from Aizawa arrived today, and soon she was rushing towards the war room, where the important nobles gathered. She saw how Bakugou read the letter with a serious tone, and soon that face contorted into what of a sort of look like of trumpet as he announced the words of General Aizawa from the letter. Glacia surrendered. We won the war. Everyone in the room either screamed in victory, smiled, or cried. Either way, the news brought an overwhelming feeling of accomplishment. It has taken over Yin's body so much that she marched towards Bakugou, stood with him so close, and flashed him a big smile. He almost held a smirk, as it was a sign that Bakugou was truly pleased with it all. Yin thought of King Todoroki and credited him in her mind, for he actually was true to his words. Deep within his eyes... I skipped a sentence. When she turned to look at her husband, despite the pleasure in his eyes, deep in his eyes, Yin could see a small hint of doubt. And so, she reached out to take his hand in hers. "I think this is right," she said in an effort to comfort him. "He'll be back here." He referred to Todoroki. "He would want the peace treaty to be signed. And we will sign it, right?" Before he answered, he looked at the joyful bunch in front of them. "I will now." In light of the news, Midnight decided for a celebrate. Surprisingly, she didn't opt for a party, but for a simple firework display. Immediately, the servants were off for preparing, and the nobles fussed about it as all they started to march outside. Bakugou was whisked away by Kirishima and the others for a drink, and Yin would have joined her lady friends, but Midoriya suddenly pulled her aside and slipped something in her hands. "You must read this, Your Majesty," the scholar whispered into her ear before quickly leaving. She looked down to see a letter from Aizawa. However, it was addressed to Midoriya. She saw the letter was already been open. Yin looked around to see if anyone saw her, and thankfully, everyone is too busy leaving the room. Yin sought the privacy of her chambers and got there to open her letter. "Your Majesty, forgive me for addressing this letter to Izuku Midoriya. However, I see this is a way so no one suspects would be drawn towards you. I will keep my letter short, and I will tell you that I am true to my words. Despite Glacia's sudden surrender, we were able to pass the river and the fortress with your strategy, and as I promised you, my alliance with you is sealed by your success. I will now be willing to play a part in your coup d'etat. General Aizawa Shotowo." After reading the letter, Yin's hand worked automatically as she dropped the letter in the flames at her fireplace, burning the evidence of her coup. She watched as the paper burned to ashes along with the words written on it. She wondered if the fire that ignited the heat on the pool of her stomach, sending a tingling sensation over her body as if 1,000 needles were pricking her at once. She's so happy that it hurts. The happiness she has right now feels like the first breath of air once you rise from a raging waves of sea that tries to drown you. Inhaling loudly, she relaxed her body to wash away any trace of giddiness as she excitedly exited her chambers to join the others to celebrate. However, Yin has to stop in the hallway and look out the window to breathe out the rest of the overwhelming joy that swimmers within her. With Aizawa on her side, the military will become her ally, and once she's secured that, she can claim the throne whenever she see it. What are you doing here? Startled, Yin turned to see Bakugou walking up to her. He stopped by her side and exhaled for the 9th time. I'm just taking it all in, she lied. All of a sudden, her chest seemed to tighten at the sight of him after her thoughts of overthrowing him. Yin ignored it and focused on looking naturally out on the outside. How about you? Shouldn't you be drinking with your friends? She asked. He turned to the window where they could see the nobles gathering outside the grounds. I was looking for you. As if the rope that gripped her heart couldn't tighten anymore, Yin suddenly found breathing to be such a struggle. Is this guilt she was feeling? Why? She almost stuttered. In Aizawa's letter, he said that before Half and Half's army surrendered, they'd already defeated them, and it was all because of you, he said, and suddenly turned to look at you, right in the eyes, which caught you off guard. Just when did he begin to look at her with such soft eyes, hinting an admiration? Yin can never fathom this man that stood in front of her, so readable yet unpredictable at all times. But the way he looks at her ignited a familiar feeling deep within her, the same feeling she felt that first time they bared their naked souls towards each other and made love with their bodies. It was exciting, intoxicating, but energizing. The happiness that hurt before is now tossed on a cliff, forgotten somewhere on the back of her mind, and all Yin could feel right now is yearning, wanting for him to bear himself to her again, despite of her rational mind. She wanted Bakugou, the Bakugou that grew and learned to gaze at her affectionately. In a low voice he muttered, "You're so fucking amazing. You know that?" The pressure of her chest is too much, and Yin was forced to look away from him. But it's not fair for him. Not when he's looking at her like this. Mustering up her courage, Yin shifted her body and turned her head towards him to look at him again. However, she was caught off guard as multiple soft explosions reached her ears, and soon colorful fireworks lit the palace, painting the gloss in her eyes with bright colors. She brightened up and forgot about everything, wanting to contemplate the beauty of the fireworks with him. Yin turned to her husband, only to be caught off guard as he captured her lips in a kiss. You know what's coming next, right?